compared to that, this seems to be a very safe way to store your watch, as opposed to the freaking sandpit with worm poop in it or whatever. That genuinely looks like a watch or a box in which you place your watch and you never ever see it again. It just basically gets swallowed by the sand.
Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here, hosting again the aBlogtoWatch Weekly with David and Ripley. Rick is, well, we don't know where Rick is. Doing farm and stuff, I guess?
He never says. That's very, very fishy to me.
I think it's the end of the year, and he knows that there's two camps, there's two opinions. One is, let's take an end of the year break, and then there's us, which is, why would we do that?
Well, it is rather fishy. He was talking about how he recently met his first genuine billionaire, and then he was doing something off in Sweden, but he really didn't mention anything surrounding this particular trip, so we can only imagine.
No, he's floated the idea in the past of, shouldn't we set a good example by taking a break and say, no, we are the working proletariat of the watch industry. We live to work, and there is no escape from our recreation. There is no rest from the fun, which is watches. Not for us, not this team. So as long as there's one of you there each week to chat, and if I'm not traveling, I will be here talking watches to the bitter end of the year. So with that said, non-stop watches. That's it. No matter what's going on in the world, non-stop new timepieces. I was once again humbled by how many completely new brands were made known to me in just the last week. I think it was like 5 or 6. You guys get a lot of these same emails as well. Anytime I think there's a slowdown in the pace of new brands, new models, zeal for watches, I am just overwhelmed by how much zeal and enthusiasm there is out there at any given moment. You guys feel the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the number of brands and discovering new brands, I feel like that's something that you expect. You're always going to be discovering more down as you go down the rabbit hole, but having this many new brands enter the space is also surprising. So you're not really discovering that brand that, oh, maybe you heard their name but haven't ever seen their watches. It's literally a brand that was launched within the last handful of years, and you haven't seen one because this is their first production model.
I asked myself a question, then we'll get out of the news, and I want you guys to ask yourself this question. With all the new brands out there, what if you somehow segmented your collecting hobby to just those brands? Like, you only wear watches from brands that came out in the last 10 years. Like, that's it. Anything older than that, it's too old for you, too vintage, too traditional. Like, could this be an enjoyable hobby, just wearing brand new stuff? It wouldn't be a very expensive hobby, at least not compared to the old stuff. Like, it's an interesting thought experiment.
You would have so many Seiko and Miyota 9 series movements. It would be a whole collection of them.
I used to have a ton of 2824 Eddas, just piles of them.
Such a great movement. I like watches with 2824.
I could start a service center with the 2824 Eddas and Solita S200s here. Yeah.
Just swap them around, see if anyone notices.
I think that as an enthusiast into watches, I would be genuinely entertained fully. Just being interested in the new watches and stuff like that is coming out right now. Yes, I wouldn't have a lot of gold watches, high complications, things like that. But I'm just saying that I feel like there's enough just in new watches to keep hobbyists occupied.
Absolutely. You would have a lot of integrated bracelet, integrated lug structure, bracelet, whatever nonsense. A lot of it. Oh my God, what is that?
Oh, it's a Yima with the nice integrated bracelet.
Oh, that one's cool. That's the one with like the PVD marble looking texture. Yeah, that one's cool. Well, I mean, I think the cool thing is if you did collect only the new brands, it's not like you'd only have modern watches. There's so many like vintage revival brands that it's like, you want a mid-century diver? There's like 10 brands that were launched in the last week that are making that. You want something that looks like a Type 20, same story with that. So you wouldn't be short a diversity of styles by only buying these very new watches.
Not at all.
No, it would be the full gamut from RM homages to 1950s looking dress watches. So,
and you'd spend, what is it, between about $500 and maybe about $3,500 on a watch. That seems to be more or less the spectrum.
Yeah, agreed. And then you'd have a couple of weird outliers, but Yeah, I think most of them sort of tend to operate in that 500 to even 2,000 range. 3,500, it's all, they always have to be kind of packing a little bit of something to, I think people draw that line once you get about around 2,500 of, well, I could have gotten a Tudor or an Omega type of thing. So, yeah, it would be a very affordable way to enjoy this hobby. And it would not cost a lot to get your watches serviced.
I'm going to go ahead and share the screen now so we can chat about some of the news. So 1 second here.
Before you do that, you can spend a whole lot less than $3,500 for something that we just launched on the store. And Ariel, you wanted to talk about this, right?
Oh, we gotta plug the new store item that was maybe one of the most popular commented articles of the week. David, tell us about the handstand.
Yeah, isn't that great? People had so many associations that we never thought of when we made it, that it's like something on which you can sacrifice your watch or a tombstone or something like that. And I was like, I never thought about that. I had this on my nightstand for
You're not always thinking about a sacrificial altar, David?
Never. And it does have that kind of vibe, especially in this green marble. I will give people that, but I think it's really freaking cool.
Yeah, if you just took the movement out, like, the disembodied heart, and just set it on it and put it under a glass dome like the Flower and Beauty and the Beast, it'd be quite the mantle display.
Isn't that freaking cool though?
So what the idea is, you take the shape of a watch hand, and you could do all types of watch hands, which is, I guess, the idea, and you make a shrine to one timepiece, which you can photograph it on. It's a weird statement piece for a room. I think the term shrine really makes sense because it's clearly not the most practical way of storing watches.
What do you mean? Why is it
well
not?
If you have a lot more than one, you know what I mean?
You get more handstands. It's as simple as that.
That's true, but what I'm saying is it's sort of a symbol in the room of like, hey, I'm a watch guy or gal, and I celebrate that by propping up my watches on, special furniture for that's related to the theme. And once you get furniture related to your hobby, you're all in.
Isn't that great? I think that's perfect.
It's a lounge for your timepiece.
Yes, and you arrive home and you just drop it on there, and it's just like it's in a good spot. It's like for your favorite watch. It's not for your second favorite watch. You're not going to put your second favorite watch on it, right? All the others are like resting on the table or like on some furniture or whatever.
So for people that have the watch that they're wearing right now, the one that you're infatuated with, some people do that. They wear one watch for a while. That's the stand for it. David's right. It's like, where to put, and you'll never lose your watch. If it goes on unless you lose the stand, then that's another problem.
Yeah. I don't know how that happens.
It's pretty big. It'd be hard to lose this. The watch is easier. You could go under a paper or something like that. It's gone for days.
Yeah, we literally have like 4 of these left in stock. So go to store.aBlogtoWatch.com and you can pick one of those up, or one of these shirts which glow in the dark. That's also a thing.
So these did well.
Yes, very well. Yeah, perfect holiday gift. If you order this week, there's still a really solid chance that you will receive it in time for Christmas.
Okay. And are we going to do more of the same hands, or because some of the discussion topics were interesting? They had suggestions of different types of hands to emulate, and there's only about 10 or maybe a dozen different hands that are worth putting into this type of shrine style. But still, there's more than 1 or 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have other ideas that are very much in the works already. So I'm not going to specify what those are, but they will be very, very cool as well. But yeah,
we also should think about the fact that we can now, if we can turn this into a trophy, we can finally have those awards we keep talking about. That's what's keeping us back from doing awards, is we don't have a sufficient trophy. But this looks like 2/3 of the way there.
This is so much more elegant and makes sense for a watch-related award than the disembodied baby fist that is the GPHG award.
Oh boy, don't even get me started with that.
Yeah, that's true. We can do more of these. We can make this in solid gold if you
want.
If
I handed you one of these and I handed you that little baby fist, I said one of these is about watches. It's a watch award. You would not expect it was like that's the best Cabbage Patch award of the year or something like that, or the best Barbie designer or something. You would not be thinking watch related.
It's from the horological cabal.
So before we move on, I guess, So should we do an award like this? Should that be the thing?
Why not? But so are we going from backwards? So basically, we're doing an award because we have the actual like award to give, or what's the logic here?
We'll have to discuss that more.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the handstand available at the aBlogtoWatch store. So it's, you know, we thought by now it's December and news from the industry would probably take you know, a little bit of a standstill, but a lot more things going on at Richemont. And we don't have to go into all of the news. That's not really going to be interesting to everyone. We don't have an article on it right now. But Jerome Lambert, high up person at Richemont, returns to his job as CEO of Jaeger LeCoultre. Probably where people like David and I got to know Mr. Lambert to begin with. You know, it's really hard to tell what kind of a manager he was, but what we do know is that that's when Jaeger made some of our favorite watches. You know, and I think some people unfairly say that this is sort of a step down for him, but really he's just a soldier doing what's needed of him. And if it takes time to go back and fix a brand, I don't know if there's anything broken with Jaeger, but it clearly doesn't have direction in the sense that we want it to. You remember we used to joke about, you know, vote David Braddon for CEO of Jaeger. Like here's and the whole campaign is here's a man with a plan, you know, because he knows what to do. I thought that was very interesting. And then another thing that was said from Richemont, and this is another. I said this a long time ago, maybe as long as a decade ago. I said eventually, and you guys will remember this, Richemont is going to start divesting itself of brands that it can't seem to figure out what to do with.
So that's a lot of brands.
They apparently, somebody at Richemont said they're at least open to it, which means that, you know, something like that could happen.
It's all going to LVMH.
It's difficult to know what brand and who would buy it, sure. But I think it's amazing that, like, I kind of said this is only a matter of time, and here we go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a demotion for Lambert. I mean, he used to be the head of the watchmaking division at Richemont.
It's a total promotion. Going back to product when he has to deal with a bunch of HR issues and boring numbers, I would do anything to go back to the product stuff. That's what sells it for these people. It's the product. They get to wear something.
It's like sending your best general to the Belgian forest of Bastogne, you know, because that's like the most important place where you gotta be, and you know that's where they are losing ground, and whatever has become of Jaeger needs fixing ASAP, and it needs someone who knows what to do with it. I hope it's not going to be a whole bunch of more vintage BS, but if we look back at the Lambert era, we used to have the Extreme Lab, we used to have master compressors and Navy SEAL collaborations and all the rest of it. So it used to be a very cool era for JLC when Lambert was there. He joined, I looked it up real quick, he joined Jaeger in 1996 and he was CEO until June 2013.
That's a long time. He had a long time to do a lot of stuff there. I do think he's going to be, let's say, the one of the best paid CEOs, right? Because he's definitely not taking a pay cut. You think that? I think the corporate job he had probably paid more than CEO of one of the brands. That's going to set it interesting. Do you think that pay will go up, or he's going to be an outlier?
I hope he makes whatever he needs to make, right?
It could be a very aggressive bonus structure tethered to the performance of the brand.
For every Jaeger sold, you get another one, basically.
So what do we think is the brand that, if Richemont were to choose to divest from it, would have the best chances on its own? I don't know that there's a clear answer.
To do what exactly?
If a brand were to be let go from Richemont, right? What brand has the best chances of thriving on its own under new ownership?
Vacheron, probably.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. I don't think that they do as well. I don't think that they are as powerful, and I don't like this word, but icon or I don't think that they have the gravitas that they should do. The product is more or less there, but the cachet, but the appeal is not. It's just not. It's just totally failed to become an alternative, a reasonable and powerful alternative to Patek and others, right, or AP. even though the product is there. So if somebody could put behind it an image or create an image for it that is more desirable and more out there, then I think the potential is huge in washroom.
I agree with David, although I might have to say Panerai. Just because I think Panerai kind of needs a fresh start, and they've very much cornered themselves from an aesthetic perspective, but also one from a brand image perspective. And so they're kind of in this position now where they can iterate among these kind of two basic designs with materials and colors and finishes, but they can't really do much else. And if they made a dress watch that wasn't a Radiomir or Luminaire, people wouldn't know what to do with it. If they made a diver that wasn't one of those two other divers, they kind of made the submersible its own collection because they didn't really know what to do with it. I don't think they're celebrated for the quality of their movements either. So I think it would be a brand that would benefit from like a really blank slate, a fresh start. Obviously kind of work within the heritage, but be able to do some really out of the box stuff under the guise of new ownership where no one's going to say the brand just made a total left turn out of the thin air. But yeah, I would say Panerai would be an interesting one to see on their own or under a different parent company.
I have to say that the answer I would have given years ago is probably different than the answer I would have given today. I'm not so sure these days. A lot has changed in the market, and I don't know who would be lucky enough to capture extra market attention. I know that a brand like Baume & Mercier has never really thrived under Richemont in any modern era. They've just held the brand back. I agree that Vacheron could use the boost from a lot more marketing. They have all these pretty assets. They don't push them too loud and far. They're quite discreet with a lot of the marketing. They could be a bigger, splashier, super luxury brand if they did a lot of that, because they do a lot of very cool things. I thought for many years that Piaget, in order to properly be able to compete with a brand like Cartier, probably shouldn't be in the same family as Cartier. I think that Van Cleef and Cartier are different enough, but Piaget and Cartier just always seemed like estranged cousins in a weird way. Like it was very difficult to decide why you would want one or the other. And I don't really know how both could do well under the same organization. Jaeger could really thrive. Jaeger could pour a bunch of money and do a lot of weird stuff. And then there's always the brand that like we forget is owned by Richemont, which is Lange. Like how long it's
good for them.
Oh yeah, they're Richemont. So like I always like I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I guess it's a good thing, but but the good thing is that they're almost at a point where they don't want to market too much because they like only make a little bit, and they got that whole German thing. They're like, it's like, we're not luxury, but wink, wink. Yes, we are. Look at our prices. So I sort of get that thing. But it's in this market right now, I think that the only way for a brand to go would probably be sort of how Ulysse Nardin, Gerard Perregaux went, which is, basically owned by the people that are working there, that are running it. I don't know that there's a big case to be made for a third party. And I think that's probably what would be most comfortable to Richemont politically. If they let go of a brand only for it to run itself, which happened, I'll remind you, with what? Montegrappa. Montegrappa was owned by Richemont, and then it was sold back to the family.
What?
Yeah, so that happened with Montegrappa. No one talks about that too much, but it wasn't some private investment firm that came in. It was basically privately run. So I think that's the most palatable to Richemont. But that's interesting news. I look forward to hopefully meeting with some of these CEOs. I hope the Richemont CEOs are going to be more available than some of the newer CEOs at LVMH. At LVMH, there's been a big shift. We've talked about some of those. Most of the brands have relatively new people, even if they're not new to the group, but they'll be there for 6 months or a year before they ever want to talk to anybody. So I really want to speak to Julien Tornare, who is now head of Hublot, which is just strange because he's always been the Zenith guy to me, and then he was Tag Heuer for so short a time. I never actually got the chance to interview him while he was working there.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So let's get to some of this week's launches. One of the ones that I was thinking a lot about, Ripley. I don't know if you went to the event. I didn't remember about it, but this is the Hamilton Dune watch. I'll just call it that. You explain.
Yeah, so Hamilton, their one of their nicknames is the watchmaker of filmmakers, and they really kind of take integration into the movies. I did go to the award show, but they really take the integration movies sort of to a next level. They're not just supplying existing models to they do this as well, but they're not just supplying existing models to the movies to be worn in them and showcase Hamilton watches. They'll often work collaboratively with the filmmakers and production departments to create basically the props for the film. Past notable examples included the Interstellar watch, which it had to mechanically have a second hand that kind of fidgeted and ticked. So there was literally like a watch doctor on set to make sure that the prop functioned properly. That wasn't even a watch Hamilton made, and it retroactively then became a collection, and then has since been expanded into a collection. We had the Tenet watches. Then there's the more conventional ones like what you see in like The Martian or whatever, where it's a regular below zero. But for Dune Part 2, they created this. It's not a watch. It's a wrist-worn device worn by the Fremen of the planet Arrakis in Dune. It doesn't tell the time. There's no hands on it. There's no screen on it. Even in the movie, it kind of looks like an Urwerk. So they made this thing for the film. But if you look at the photo of them, all of them in the case, these watches, which are already quite large, are they're dwarfed by the movie prop. So it makes sense why they didn't just make the watch version of the prop. Instead, they used the Ventura to create two timepieces. One's a traditional quartz watch with like an LED backlight. And then we have the topic of the review, which is the Ventura Edge. It's a digital version, which is more closely related to the movie prop. It's all hand assembled, very, well made for being a digital watch, as it should be. Limited edition of 2,000 pieces. You press the button and the screen lights up, but you can still see the numbers. It's like a LED style blue on black when it's not illuminated, and there's this kind of automation in the middle with the light as well. But it's a cool piece. It comes in a very elaborate box that's very kind of movie themed, but it's very kind of a wearable version of the prop watch, but kind of a cool offering for the Dune super fans, without feeling like total cosplay.
And how much did this wearable prop cost?
I believe it's $2,500. It's a 2,000 piece limited edition. And where I got to see the prop and where you'll see some of these photos was the Hamilton Behind the Camera Awards. They don't just make the watches. They really like to integrate themselves into the film industry. So they did, they have the Behind the Camera Awards. This year was the 13th edition of it. And it specifically is an award show that celebrates the people who work in the film industry off screen. So it's not the actors, even though Ryan Reynolds won an award for his screenwriter award this year for it. But it's specifically the off-screen roles, which kind of ties into the whole prop environment that Hamilton works. So they really are part of the film industry, and watches like this are kind of a cool tie-in that they didn't just make the prop watch or the thematic watch. It kind of, you've got the prop watch and then its commercially available cousin.
It's too bad Rick is not here. Wasn't he trying to get a shout out from Ryan Reynolds? You were in the same room as him. That's about as close as the show has gotten to him so far.
Well, maybe that's actually where Rick is. He flew to LA to go stop Mr. Reynolds. Yeah, so maybe that's exactly where he is. He heard he was there when he saw the article and immediately hopped on a plane. So I don't know, but I like the piece. It's quite expensive for what it is, but objectively
what is the
speaking,
fashion statement that someone makes by wearing this? I admire it as well on various levels, but I'm really trying to understand where to wear something like this. I mean, even like if you were at a Dune cosplay event, you'd have to be really committed to have an outfit that this went with.
I mean, I kind of see it more as something that someone could wear and like celebrate their love of Dune without fully leaning into it. If you like, Dune doesn't really have a totem in the same way that like Lord of the Rings does. And think about how many people even today are wearing like some element from the movie, whether it's that leaf pin or like the ring or something on their person. But Dune doesn't really have that. You can't really like bring out the giant knife that they use or anything like that in regular life. So this is kind of a way to like enjoy the movie, celebrate your love of the movie in that world, but have something that you can actually wear in everyday life.
Do you know anyone? I mean, look, I like Dune as well, but it's never been the franchise to have those types of fans.
No, but maybe they're trying to make it that way. Think about how many times it's been remade, like just in our lifetimes. You know, I feel like it's one of those franchises that they're really trying to like make it a thing. And this latest, iteration of it is probably the biggest it's ever been. So, I feel like this is sort of in that same way. We saw so much Lord of the Rings merch come out in, during like the Peter Jackson film era.
I mean, again, bless them for doing it. I love Hamilton's association with the watches and stuff like that. I kind of want to like interview the people at Hamilton that designed this. I was like, so tell me about what you were thinking. Because like, they'll tell you, they're like, we had no idea what we're doing, right? Like, well, we took the movie prop and then, yeah. I mean, like, there's a picture here, and I could see the parallels a little bit.
So when Hamilton made the movie prop, they didn't have any point of reference for what it was. They knew who was going to be wearing it as far as like the people, the Fremen people, but they didn't have any point of reference for what it did. Similar with Tenet. So they kind of made this thing that could fit into the world and the aesthetic that would sort of look that way, but they didn't really know what the movie device was when they made the movie device.
What does it do in the movie again?
I'm not entirely sure. So I watched it back again, and keep in mind, it's like a 3-hour movie, and this wasn't going to be a heavily featured scene. And so you do see it on the wrists of them, around, but if they did see it or had a dedicated scene, it was so quick. It was like when I poured a cup of tea or something and totally missed it when I watched it again. But if you see it, there's no hands at all on it. But I'd imagine that when Hamilton was developing these watches, the movie hadn't been out yet, so they didn't know exactly what it could do. And so they made something that visually was very similar, but, since the thing itself wasn't even a watch, they couldn't make the movie prop. So they went with this route, and ultimately it is more wearable. I still kind of wish they made the movie prop just a watch, but no one could wear that realistically in everyday life as, on anything more than an occasional basis.
It's just a weird compromise. The movie prop doesn't tell the time, so there's really no point in turning into a watch. This doesn't look like the movie prop exactly, but does tell the time. So it doesn't actually come from the universe. It's only inspired by it. And I'm a purist. I like props that look exactly or very much like the things in the movies. Like, this is an artistic variation on it. And I agree. If you're a hardcore Dune collector, does it tell you anything other than the time? Does it cycle through other complications?
No. So I did not read the manual. I did not have to. There's the one lone button on it which illuminates the display when you press it. It'll light up for 5 seconds. If you hold the button, you enter the setting mode, and it kind of sets like a digital watch where it'll start with the hours. You compress it to go up and down. You hold it again, it'll cycle to the minutes, and then go to the seconds. The one thing it can do beyond that is if you press the button while the light is illuminated in those 5 seconds, it'll show you the running seconds on the lower half of the screen for like maybe 10 seconds or something before it goes out. So it's quite literally a time-only watch. And I also find it interesting that it's all like hand assembled in Switzerland. It's, from a construction and, production standpoint, this is a higher end Hamilton than their entry level offerings. But it is like a time only digital watch. It's as simple as it gets.
I feel like it has to have a special button which activates the director's commentary.
And then you can't stop it. It just goes on for like 2 hours.
But it's in life.
Just someone talking.
You'll be walking the street and all of a sudden director's commentary. That should be the special feature. On-demand director's commentary.
You could easily put an SD card in the case with gigabytes and gigabytes of sound. But my favorite part was actually the box. After watching the movie again, I really got to appreciate the details that went into the box. The external part of it looks like a device in it. The internal part looks like this room where this is going to go really deep, like a ceremonial type of room where the Fremen people keep the baby sandworms in the pit. And then the watch itself sits on a display stand where the display stand is like a plastic sealed sample thing of spice, which is basically the worm poop, the giant sandworm poop, but it has the power to bend time and space, and it's kind of the source of conflict in the Dune universe.
It comes with novelty spice. How can you go wrong?
Yeah, you have it comes with spice. So if the watch wasn't
compared to that, this seems to be a very safe way to store your watch, as opposed to the freaking sandpit with worm poop in it or whatever. That genuinely looks like a watch or a box in which you place your watch and you never ever see it again. It just basically gets swallowed by the sand.
It does look sacrificial. If we were talking about sacrificial, this this is the stage is set.
You close the lid, and an hour later the watch is gone. You don't want to know where it went.
It goes back for service.
I remember what I was going to say about the watch stand. What we could do, tell me if this is insane. You take down a bunch of fake watches, you melt them down, and they turn that into watch stands.
That would be very cool.
That's a good use of fake watches. Ungodly expensive. People are going to pay a premium for destroying fake watches this way.
That's cool.
But if you could have a holder of real watches made by fake watches that just wanted to be somewhat close to the real thing, what a poetic way.
Pretty difficult to explain to the authorities why we want to buy fake watches in bulk, basically.
No, buy it from the authorities. What do they do with the seized ones? They destroy them anyways.
We're destroying it. Exactly. We're destroying it for them. We're providing a valuable service, and we destroy it by upcycling it into.
We could be paid on both sides, David. That's the beauty of it.
Let's do this.
We will be trash collecting and trash reusing all in one fell swoop.
Should we call Guy from D-Trash? I think he might be able to.
He's an expert at D-trashing. That's right. Though retain creative control of what the hand looks like. He might have a thing or two to say about that.
Yeah, he will.
Let's do this.
Okay, so let's move on to another watch, which I want to say is like similar in a weird way to the Dune watch. Not the same price point, but I don't know why. I feel like these watches are weird distant cousins of one another.
That's bang on, yeah.
This is the Panerai Submersible Elux Lab ID PAM 01800 watch. Okay, so this is a crop of a few types of watches out there. I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. Very high luxury timepiece, which has a mechanical movement, but has an auxiliary system, which is electronic to produce illumination in some way or another. Ripley, would you say that adequately sums it up?
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the electronic component isn't battery powered. It itself is like a little electromechanical generator.
Well, yes, there's this, you generate a little bit of electricity, which is stored in an accumulator. I'm not an expert on exactly what constitutes a battery, but energy is stored. These are electronic based. They're using electricity, whatever way you want to refer to it. This is not a small fire inside creating illumination in an analog fashion. It's I think what's interesting here is Panerai is rarely the first, right? They were not the first to do like the internal depth gauge, but they decided to do that, and they did an electronic one. Remember that? Rather, Jaeger is like, we're gonna do it fully mechanical. Panerai is like, why? And they just do an electronic one. Mechanical watch, electronic depth gauge. So I guess there's precedence for this. The watch is very large. I mean, comically large. And it has an interesting power reserve indicator on the dial, which is an electronic one, which is kind of neat. The power can last for up to 30 minutes, right? So not the accumulator can last, I guess it's, spring powered. And the light sort of gets channeled through these, basically, I guess there's some sort of plastic that allows light to go through them easily. Hour markers and hands into the bezel. It's engineered in a very clever way, so it maintains this high water resistance, but there's, light traveling through. And the switch is the god-awful, it's the ugliest thing in the world, right? The Elux switch, you have to flip the thing up. It's got a little tiny, underwhelming switch underneath there. Just why they need that little flappy thing there, I don't know. But whatever. You turn it on, it glows.
It's Panerai, they love flaps.
Yeah, okay.
Just a little thing or whatever.
It does its job. It's a fun experience, right? But once again in the watch industry, we've seen this many times, you feel like a 13-year-old with an unlimited budget in an autocratic streak somehow decided to get something like this made. Like, that's who this is for, because there's no practical scenario where some type of diver is like, this is the only tool that will satisfy the job. That scenario simply doesn't exist. Plus, it's too big to just sort of be casually worn around. Like, this is for a very macho event where you're clearly wearing a watch which is too big, which is clearly glowing in the middle of the day, just so people look at it and be like, what the hell are you doing, man? Thoughts, gentlemen?
It does look like something. I mean, if you took away the name Panerai and it wasn't a Luminor and it wasn't $100,000, it would almost seem like a child's toy that came in like a soldier kit or something. It's so comically large and oversized. It looks like a cartoon rendering of a tough guy watch, and they've gone a really, really long way to do what Super Luminova does in a kind of a roundabout fashion. But for people like Rick who really love the little levers on Panerais, now you get two of them, one on each side. So there is that. And if I recall correctly, they did something kind of cool with the light in the bezel, since it's only the pip that illuminates. Rather than having the entire ring illuminated under the solid bezel, it only illuminates under the pip and then tracks along like the LED ring under it, so it's more conservative on its power. So they really engineered what is kind of a useless thing, but like they put the time into it to make it as practical as they could within the impracticality of it. So it's a bizarre offering. Like you said, I don't really know who buys it other as a tool and not just a toy.
David?
I think we have to be fair a little bit. It is oversized. It is objectively, almost ludicrously and unbearably large. But to be fair, I think we should not be like picking and choosing which watch we claim to be a stupid toy, when almost everything that we look at, that is a luxury mechanical watch and has some sort of a quasi purpose, it's always going to be a toy. These are never ever going to be, and not just Panerai, but anything that we've ever covered over the last 2 decades has always been basically a glorified toy that is overpriced and probably not very suitable for the job. So it's not just Panerai and not just this. It's just another take on the same thing, right? I don't think it's just them. So if we're going to give Panerai a hard time about it, we should do that for everybody who makes a stupid toy. I think it's just a stupid toy turned up to 11 with a stupid price, but it's not just them doing it.
But there's something about the stupid toy having one functional purpose, just one in one niche environment, that means that it has a legitimacy outside of play and practice. And I feel like that adds like in this mining environment, in this situation with this outfit, this is the perfect tool. But I feel like we like that one delineated special niche task, and without it, it just becomes too theoretical.
Yeah, it is detached from any particular use scenario. That is true. Like you have to try very hard to imagine some place where this would be useful. That's true.
Well, and I think where it falls a little short for me is, anything Jacob & Co. makes falls into the category of horological toy, but some of the the Sapphire Bugatti engine isn't something you can do with a G-Shock. That's just really cool to look at and examine, like, how did they make this? And what a giant exercise in a waste of the power reserve going into making this little engine run that does nothing but look cool. Well, I mean, it is. It's like, what would the power reserve be if you didn't have like 12 pistons running in it, for nothing but cosmetic purposes? But for something like this, if you want a watch that lights up and looks really cool, like, a $200 G-Shock will do that. A $90 G-Shock will do that. Any Timex Indiglo at $50 will do that. So the one novelty that it has, if it's divorced from its like theoretical technical application, it's an itch you can scratch at like an infinitely affordable price point. So I can wrap my head around that ridiculous Jacob & Co. Godfather thing that like plays the theme song and has all the engravings, or like the planetarium on your wrist with part of Everest and the moon or whatever. But then you get to this and it's like, it's cool, don't get me wrong, and like I can appreciate the engineering in it, but its novelty can be had for such a lower price. It's hard to appreciate its novelty for just the fun factor of it.
Yeah, there's not a lot of inexpensive music box watches. That's true. Yet your average G-Shock can glow quite bright.
Yeah, okay, I give it that. It's just an odd exercise. It's just, I just visited when we were last talking about Panerai like half an hour ago. I went to their website and there's no substance there anywhere. It's just such an odd mixture of like nonsense basically at this point. It's so far detached from what it used to be, whatever it was. It's just, I was looking at like 2/3 of the watches I never even knew existed, even though they look like they are from the 90s. So it's like, it's just such an odd mix of things at Panerai when we were talking about which brand Richmond should let go or remodel completely. That's probably Panerai.
I'd love to see them go a little Hublot.
Okay.
Even more so? Like how Hublot can they get?
Like more playful, more fun. Like stop playing Italian submarine soldier and like go do something ridiculous and irreverent and colorful and, avant-garde from a design perspective, not necessarily giving us these historic models presented in a modern manner.
Panerai still is under the illusion that they're in a war. They're so not.
They really are not.
Look, I mean, I appreciate they did this. It's fun. It puts a smile on my face. But maybe it's the price. If this was like $20,000, would we be so morally questioning the existence here? Because I think on this price point, here's what it really is. I want to feel positive about the person that buys this. I want to be like, you, sir, are a cool guy because you can afford that, you can wear it. But I still feel if I saw it on someone, like, I mean, is that the best that you could have chosen to wear it right now? Like, you're impressing me by making me like laugh that you're wearing it. But like, it's sort of like $100,000 novelty T-shirt.
It really is. Yeah, that's a really good point to try and feel good or to resonate with the person who's buying this. And that's a very difficult exercise at this point. I mean, I'm happy for them if they are happy, but it's not that I'm judging.
I want to be the guy who's like, that's a good decision for me. Like, that's a cool guy to hang out with, right? This guy, like, I just don't, I'm afraid of how high his truck is.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. Moving on. Published part 2 of our look inside of La Fabrique du Temps in Geneva. This is where Louis Vuitton produces their watches. The first part from last week was about the arts department, which was very impressive. And now we look a little bit about how they make watches, a lot of tourbillon assembly, and things like that. And it's easy to sometimes forget the sheer variety of crazy things they've done. For example, the GMT tourbillon, like you don't think too much about that, but like there's not a lot of GMT tourbillons out there. Well, Louis Vuitton has the GMT tourbillon, which is funny as to how popular GMTs are these days. But we went in there and we took a close look. We did an interview with them here. I think one of the interesting things I see in the comments is people thanking, us, for going in there and bringing some of these pictures out there, because it's like they still don't believe. They're like, yeah, I didn't believe that the big Louis Vuitton name actually did stuff this way. Is that actually hard for people to believe, that despite it being, a brand that sells a lot of handbags and things like that, is it difficult for them to believe that this level of craftsmanship exists at a company that's so diversified? I guess we've seen it, so we know, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a foreign concept to people. People so frequently see the brands start doing the high crafted stuff, and as they get success and become super mainstream, let alone to the point where they're like one of the most famous luxury brands in the world, you see the production go the opposite direction, where it becomes more economical. They make the budget friendly line. They kind of water it down. More gets taken over by automation. You don't often see it where the brand goes in the opposite direction and, starts making really, really serious stuff after making a name for itself on the mainstream level, where, you know, if Louis Vuitton wanted to, they could have just done what most of the other fashion labels did, get some decent manufacturer to make a fine watch, stamp their name on it with their designs, and call it a day, and they would sell because it's Louis Vuitton. But they really want to actually do watchmaking, and you don't really see that with a lot of brands. It's usually the brand gets watered down, and people lament about, oh, the new brand isn't like the old brand, and the quality's gone way down since they were bought out by so and so, and all of that. So I think it's just a foreign concept to people, where they think of handbags and purses and this omnipresent luxury label, but you know, this is the type of stuff that you would see them starting out before they were bought by, you know, LVMH type of thing. So I just think people aren't used to it, but I think they do really like seeing it and can appreciate it once they do see it.
I wanted to remind everyone that the other watch that we were thinking about, one of them with the electronic light system, is a Louis Vuitton, and it's here on the screen. It's the Tambour Spin Time Air Quantum, which came out a couple of years ago.
That's cool.
And you know, this was a fun looking watch. This is a slightly different approach than the Panerai one. You know, looking between the two, I think I would definitely prefer to wear the Louis Vuitton. Just it's more stylish, right? Like let's be honest. This was a little bit less, not significantly less. I'm trying to remind myself what the price was. I feel like it was like 80,000.
Do they still make these watches with these spinning cubes on them?
The spin time? Oh yeah. If you I'll go back to the other article in a minute here. You'll see, 93,000 as of about 2-3 years ago. So about the same price really, as the Panerai. But going back here, yes, even when we went there, we saw them assembling. This is one of the spin times that has some diamonds and a gem. I'm sorry, a stone dial there in the middle there. So they're still making those. There's another version right there. That suit your fancy, the spin time, David?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, they're cool.
I love this concept. Yeah, since the launch,
they're
cool.
very, very cool. Going back to what Ripley said about it's difficult to fathom. The way I started to look at it, it's not a precise analog, but it's like Louis Vuitton is the Vatican, and the Vatican commissions art. Right. And like, yes, the art has to be on a very specific theme, which is either Catholicism or here Louis Vuitton. But all these artists from all these craftsmanship backgrounds can do their art in the name of this holy house. Right. So that's sort of the way of looking at it. It's like, yes, they have the more pedestrian, even though they're still expensive, Louis Vuitton handbags and certain fashion items and things like that. Or the house commissions very, very high-end art. Now, in this instance, it's not quite commissioning because it's their own in-house people, but they essentially bought a company, they absorbed it, and they're like, we love what you do. Now you do it for us now, for the holy house, which is Louis Vuitton. And I know it's not a precise analogy, but that's the way I sort of define the large variety. We talked about the number of products they make, that there's like, thousands of SKUs at any given time between lifestyle and home goods and furniture and chess sets and just a whole pantheon of different types of products and things like that. But I think what's important to say is, given what they own, there's really no one out there who can claim to be taking watchmaking more seriously, right? Like Louis Vuitton can claim, we take watchmaking, the craft, as seriously as anyone else in the industry right now. And I think that's effectively true.
Yeah. I mean, turned up to a very, very high-end and very elaborate point. I think there's, just as much merit to making a $3,000 watch more durable, more accurate, more, this and that. So I'm not saying that this is more watchmaking than any of those, but it's certainly a very cool take and a very high-end take and a very low compromise approach to watchmaking, even though, of course, they have all the money to spend and all the customers who can finance this. But at the same time, I appreciate it very much. Imagine
this, David. You are a Louis Vuitton VIP customer, and Louis Vuitton is presenting to you a $350,000 automata watch. And you as a customer, you retort, yes, that's quite nice, Louis Vuitton, but I don't know you as a watchmaker. So-and-so brand that I've heard of, they're a watchmaker. And Louis Vuitton wants to respond, maybe you don't know all the things we do, But I assure you that if you came and took a look at our operation, you would agree that we apply just as much art and heritage and watchmaking skill as that brand. They've got nothing on us. If you like their aesthetic more, that's fine. But you can't say they're any more of a watchmaker than we are.
Yeah, that's a cool flex. Yeah, I give them that.
That's what I think is a big part of it. Ripley?
Yeah, I would agree, because they don't need to do it this extensively. If they wanted to just assert themselves as a serious watchmaker, they really didn't need to go this hard in the paint with the artistic stuff and the just downright whimsical and practical stuff. I think a point you made about them when we were talking about the part one was they just don't want, they don't necessarily want to be these brands like Patek Philippe, but they also don't want to say that anyone else can do it better than them. So they do these things that almost seem uncharacteristic from La Fabrique du Temps. But at the same time, I think, whether it's because of ego or to cultivate public perception, I think it's ultimately a very positive thing for the company, because every single one of these things, even if I think they're stylistically so far from what I'd wear, it's really well crafted and just really cool. So I think it's a great thing for the company.
And we'll continue to see what they do. And if they are the Louis Vuitton we like, they will spend time trying to impress us, right? And I think that that's what we like. I mean, David, and I remember the difference between watch events. We're like, I'm not impressed. I guess that'll sell. And ones are like, wow, that's a niche product, but I like that. And right now, Louis Vuitton is not boring us with just stuff they can sell. They want to impress the the elite intellectual watch enthusiast and collector, which is something that I think we appreciate, because, as Ripley said, they could have easily just gone a mainstream route. And Louis Vuitton arguably has done a little bit of that in the past, more mainstream with their watches, though I think they were always nice. But again, that was our look at Louis Vuitton's La Fabrique du Temps, how they make watches over in Geneva. Let's move on. What is the next thing we have to talk about? I had a bunch of stuff open here. We're not going to talk about the Apple Watch. I always like chatting about that, but then everybody rolls their eyes like, Apple Watch. I wrote about the bracelet. I was most impressed with the bracelet on the new Apple Watch Ultra 2 in black titanium bracelet. $200 for a titanium mesh metal bracelet. That's a big deal, right, guys?
With a very good clasp as well.
I didn't even know that existed. I have to check that out.
I actually recently got myself an Apple Watch, just a regular Series 10, the black aluminum one.
Just really quick on the screen there. It was like over $1,000 for Omegas, but now is an option for the Apple Watch Ultra 2, both in the black and natural titanium, mesh metal titanium, super cool looking and comfortable. I as watch people who like to know about good bracelets, that's definitely a cool one.
It's a $200 bracelet there.
Yeah.
I think it's grade 5 as well, for those who really geek out about the differences in titanium. If I'm not mistaken, the Omega would be grade 2 because it came on the No Time to Die.
I want to meet someone who actually can speak intelligently about titanium grades. We all speak about grade 2, not grade 5. Would you know a grade 3 or 4 if it hit you in the face? I wouldn't.
Well, I don't know why they're not necessarily used. From what I understand, grade 2 is commercially pure titanium. Obviously, there'll be tolerances of other stuff in there. Grade 5, it's stronger because it's alloyed with a couple other things. Grade 23 is basically the same thing as grade 5, but it's got a tighter tolerance for some of the other things in it, and so that's why it's used for medical implants. But when you see some brand flex on using grade 23, it's basically like saying fancy grade 5. I think, technically speaking, grade 5 was going to be a little bit more durable and hard wearing, but I think the big advantage of it for watchmaking is you can high polish it in a manner that you can't with grade 2. So you can get those really brightly finished surfaces. But now with all the coatings for, where you can increase the scratch resistance up to like 5 times, 7 times stainless steel, the performance benefits between the different grades are kind of be a wash, but they do offer a bit of a different appearance.
I still think Citizen nailed it with Super Titanium. Just call it Super. People like Super Nintendo. No crazy grades. No AAA titanium. Just super titanium. That's the best anyone's done.
Well, and they use all of the grades available to them in it, and so that's kind of the beauty of it. Super titanium isn't so much a material as it is a concept, where some parts will be grade 5, some parts will be grade 2. It really just depends whatever is going to be yield the best performance for that product. So or that component of that product. So I like that from a branding perspective.
Keeping it super. Okay, we're going to move on to the last watch we're going to talk about today. And this was one that you saw out in the field, I guess. You visited the robot watch manufacturer in it's a Czech company. You visited them. I guess they're in Prague or outside of Prague.
Yeah, so they've got their a showroom in Prague. Production facilities just right on the outskirts of town there. A really cool company. They very proudly
we talked about it, right?
Yeah, very proudly Czech. And this watch doesn't look like other chronographs, but as the more details you start digging in, there's a lot of things it does interesting, from that perforated dial to the little car-shaped seconds hand to the date window being all the way up there at like 10, 11 o'clock. And it's not a disc, it's a skeletonized numerals on a circular frame that rotates through. So it does a lot of cool stuff. Lecoultre movement.
I like the loom on the bezel for the hour markers there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Cool loom sunken into the bezel. Also uses grade 5 titanium for the case.
Not grade 6, huh?
I mean, 23, double or nothing. But they do a bunch of different colors. They actually just released one with I think it's a blue PVD case and a white dial. But all of their watches tie into a something from Czech history and heritage. So this is the Minor after like the Aero Minor, a Czech car that raced in the 24-hour Le Mans and did quite well, won its class, but obviously the history of the Czech Republic and falling behind the Iron Curtain and all of that, and the wars sort of stifled their presence as far as a major automotive manufacturer for sporting events. But the car did quite well. This celebrates that, hence why the second hand is shaped like a car and it's mirrored on the back. And all their watches are customizable, so they only do about 200 to 300 watches a year, but you can customize this watch. So if you wrote them and said, I like this, but I want the seconds hand to be my car or something, they do that for you. They use these models sort of as bases, and as I get into the article, some of them are small alterations. The owner and founder of the company has his personal car on his watch, but then you can get into some really outlandish ones, where there's one of these where a big guitar collector bought it and the whole thing's guitar themed. So each of the chronograph hands is a different type of guitar. You've got a Les Paul on one, you've got like the classic like triangular metal guitar on another. So it's it's really cool that they're able to customize it given their small production. And you would expect if they're customizing a watch and they're only making a few hundred a year, it'd be woefully expensive, but it's not. I think this is around $5,000, which it's not the cheapest way to get your hands on a Lecoultre chronograph, but it's also a very unique offering, and they don't charge actually all that much when you want to customize it either. So that's kind of a cool detail about them.
That's very, very cool. I think it's like, oh god, yeah, I think it's very cool. The execution, all the rest of it. I think it's a bit too thick, but that comes from the movement and not from somewhere else. It's also interesting to see how we can mix up a very basic triple sub-dial chronograph just by highlighting 2 sub-dials, leaving the running seconds basically without a frame, and then putting the date at not even 10, not 11 o'clock, but somewhere in between with a little frame. It's just such a cool dial layout and such a refreshing face for a watch, including the bezel that appears to be a rotating bezel with like little markers on it. It's not super useful or utilitarian, but at the same time, it's one of the best chronograph designs in terms of creativity and yet functionality that I've seen in quite some time. It's very cool.
I want to ask the question: what relationship do you have to have with your car to want to be reminded of it on your watch?
Well, I think you have to like your car more than I like my Honda Fit. I just don't think the Honda Fit chronograph really packs the same type of punch as, like, you know, a historic Czech automobile that raced in the 24-hour Le Mans. But you know, I think, you know, people get their initials. There's one guy who got a pocket knife because he owns a knife company. I've seen wine bottles on some of these hands, but I think it's a nice way of, like, if you really like your car and you're a car guy and you're all about this model, being able to celebrate it on your watch in a non-annoying manner. You know what I mean? Like, it's a little counterweight on a seconds hand. It's not like you bought the full BMW branded, you know, watch where it's like, okay, cool guy, we know it, we get it. You have a BMW, you just couldn't bring your car into the bar. You know, this is kind of a much more subdued way where, and then they also do a really good job of actually making the cars look like their cars or the guitars or whatever they're doing with them. And you know, it's a production facilities, but it's very much a workshop. Like, you know, they're painting like 2 or 3 hands at a time and finishing them at a little workstation. And, you know, it's not like these are just,
it's adorable.
Yeah.
If there's anything I know about car collectors, like watch collectors, they move in and out of inventory quite quickly. It's a lot easier to own a bunch of watches than it is cars. So I'm thinking, to go to the step of having somebody make a watch that reminds you of one car that you probably are going to get rid of at some point, then you have this watch that reminds you of like an ex-girlfriend or something like that, then you have to get rid of that, but then you can't get rid of it unless someone owns that car. It starts to get very complicated.
Although I'm sure you could probably throw it in as a deal sweetener for the car, and the buyer of
so
the
it comes with the car.
Well,
Okay,
if I got my Honda Fit on my watch and I was getting rid of it, you know, I think I'd have an easier time getting a little bit higher price for my car with the watch than I would just trying to find another Honda Fit buyer who wanted a watch who probably cost as much as his car.
And a watch called the Fit makes sense because we want watches to fit.
Yes, and the Fit is a masterclass in proportions. It's the size of an Easter egg on the outside, but just like that room in Harry Potter, it's giant on the inside. It fits anything you need in it.
The hatchback, amazing design. Is there a watch equivalent of that? Like, it's not always the best looking, but man, is that an effective case design? Is there something like that?
That's a really good question. Probably some moderately bulky diver chrono. Something with screw down crowns and pushers and all the rest of it.
Oh, screw down crowns. No, nothing with screw down crowns is ever going to be given an award for space efficiency.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, it's like, that's a good point. Space efficiency in a watch.
What's the little watch that could?
Like, I think the Reverso is that, where you get a lot more functionality than you would expect. It can be still pretty small, but it still fits a decent movement.
I don't know the answer. I just think it's interesting to ask.
It's either the Reverso or the Cartier Basculante, the one that super folds, because the Honda Fit seats don't just fold down, they can also fold up, so you can get floor to ceiling to like move a TV or something big or a chair. So you get 2 different axes of folding on the rear seats, and I think that most represents that ridiculous Cartier with that flips around in its frame.
Well, that's our question for the audience. If you can think of a proper analog in watch terms for the Honda Fit, let us know, and we will be unfairly judging your responses.
That's quite the invitation.
That's our show for this week. We believe that our glorious host and leader will be back next week, unless he's still gallivanting with billionaires.
Or stalking Ryan Reynolds.
Which is typical of aBlogtoWatch editor behavior. We're constantly gallivanting with the billionaire. How else could we have such deep insight into the understandings of the diamond lover, the gold watch lover, the grand complication lover?
The Panerai Elux buyer.
The Panerai Elux lover, yes. We are following them around. We're seeing what they're doing. We're in the field studying this behavior. It's real anthropology.
You're sending all of them to therapy, but that's another question.
It looks like this year is not letting up in terms of news, and there's more watches coming. So we'll continue to produce episodes until the end of the year, as long as new watches keep coming out. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, David and Ripley. And this has been us for aBlogtoWatch Weekly this week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.